Herbosa,
Yes, sir.
doon sa inyong paliwanag, sinasabi po ninyo na, yun nga, the context of what transpired.
Yes, sir.
Opo. Ang akin lang ho naman, ang hindi ko maintindihan, no? Bakit parang maraming naging shortcut doon sa paggawa ng pag-aayos ng mga Lopez loan? Sabi nyo kanina, hindi naman yun dahil sa collateral kahit hindi binigyan ng Maynilad. Agree. Sige ho, maganda yung business. Meron kang monopoly, duopoly sa pagbibigay ng tubig. Ikaw lang ang may control. Kasama mo ang Ayala sa kabilang banda at ikaw naman yung may-ari sa kabila. Pero ang usapan ninyo doon, magkokolekta kayo within 1 year. At dahil doon, nagkaroon kayo ng guarantee ng joint solidary signature. And yet, hindi nyo ginawa. Wala akong nakitang ganun. In the process of eligibility, sinabi na ng Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, huwag nyo itong ibenta, itong dalawang to. Pero ginawa pa rin po na ibinenta. Kanina narinig naman natin si Mr. Manyalak. In fact, dapat nga hindi na siya imbitahin dito dahil sa private side siya. Yung binenta nyo 1.66 billion, tinanggal nyo na yung waiver ng penalties and defaults, ang nakolekta lang natin is 1.69 billion. In 3 years time, nakabawi naman yung mga kumpanya. So, I don't understand the logic on this. And, I will call your attention, Mr. Herbosa. June 17, ang inyong legal gumawa ng study on calling the guarantee of Ben Press. What happens, sabi nung legal, if DBP calls on the Ben Press guarantee now, will this extinguish Maynilad's obligation to the bank? Sinabi ho dito, malinaw, hindi. We can call on that. Meaning to say, kasi Mr. Herbosa, from the private banking point of view, naintindihan ko yung binabanggit ninyo. Pero from the government financial point of view, talagang nakikita ko yung mga shortcut at yung pagbibigay dito sa loans na to. From 10 billion to 3 billion. Huwag na muna natin sa amin Lopez loan, yun na po sa total, no? From 10 billion to 3 billion, at yung pinakamagandang loans ninyo, ibinenta ninyo at nilipat. That I cannot understand. Kasi nung nangyayari po ito, Mr. Herbosa, nagkaroon din kami sa National Home Mortgage and Finance Corporation. Ang gumawa din ng study, Ernst & Young. Yung mga loans namin na kumukolekta na 70% and above, hindi namin binenta. Hindi ho namin binenta dahil alam namin may recovery. Pero yung 60%, 69% and below, kasi nga yung parang pinaka high side na niya ho ata is about 60% and below. Yun ang pinabayaan na namin. Based on the study of the Ernst & Young. But seemingly, in this particular case, and I'm looking at all the studies conducted, nagsalitan ang inyong legal, yung credit committee, TWG and Ernst & Young, sabi huwag niyong pakialaman yung those that have contracts with the government corporations, huwag natin ipasok dyan. And yet, ginalaw. Hanggang ngayon, Mr. Herbosa, walang mapakita na letters on foreclosure or call on guarantee. Wala akong makitang dokumentong ganyan. So, I agree with you that it was to liquefy or to give support to the banking sector. But seemingly, in this particular case, something is wrong with the loans sold by DBP to the SPV. Mr. Herbosa.
Mr. Chairman.
Sir, thank you. Thank you. You're not,
sa COMSEC natin, kung may breakdown tayo ng 9.556 billion na NPLs na binenta nila, meron ba tayong breakdown? O Lopez lang alam natin?
Hindi, meron.
Mr. Chairman, from the submission of the DBP, we have only the list of the companies included in the 9.556 billion.
Mr. Chairman, while we're checking for the documents, I think Mr. Herbosa will reply. Yes, Mr. Herbosa, you're recognized.
sir, I just want to say, you're not going to see any notice of foreclosure on the Lopez loans, for that matter, the NPLs that were sent to the SPV, because there's no condemnation of the loan. It was a true sale. And also, may I again repeat the clarification by the BSP that when you sell to the market at the time without benefit of the certificate of eligibility, that's legal. The certificate of eligibility under the SPAB laws gives you tax exemption. Now, BSP is very, very strict to make sure there are no freeloaders. Kaya
Mr.
nga
Chairman,
po,
point of order.
ginawa
Mr.
ho
Chairman,
nila,
point of order.
if I may finish,
Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Herbosa, I don't think you are to judge what is because the law is very clear. There has to have eligibility. What you are citing is the implementing rules of regulations that they made as part of the SPV Act. But the SPV law is very clear. The BSP is here. Ang legal po lang nandito. And they're saying that if you put it in the SPV, there should be compliance on the law. So I don't know.
may I just thank you, Congressman. But may I just dispute your point? The certificate of eligibility gives the seller the tax exemption, but does not prevent the seller to go into the secondary market. I think maybe, sir, to end the discussion, we can have the BSP again clarify it.
Mr. Herbosa, magkakaroon lang po ng linaw yan sa korte. Once we make the committee record and the ombudsman will file a case, dyan makikita kung sinong tama sa atin.
May I remind the sponsor and the resource person to address the chair in your response
Sorry.
so that we avoid this.
Yes, sir.
You know, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman,
Mr. Chair.
I apologize. Mr. Chairman.
I also apologize.
Si Mr. Herbosa kasi, pinababayaan ko yung mga salita niya because he was not part of the process before. Pero kung magsasalita siya dito on a statement of law, palagay ko mali. Kahit nga yung BSP sinabi niya I cannot judge whether it's legal or not. Let the courts decide. Pero ngayon, he will insist on a point and dispute the law. Kaya nga sinasabi ko, huwag tayo magdebate dyan. I will allow you. Pero if you will stand by yung statement mo on the law, sige, pag-usapan natin yan pag nag-file kami ng case. But I tell you 100% mananalo yung posisyon namin. It is not a question of eligibility. Pag dinala nyo sa batas, sa SPV law, you comply with the law. Yan ang sinabi ng Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, hindi sa akin yan. Attorney Lagadjo, tama po ba? Pag ginamit mo yung SPV law, dapat may eligibility sa Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas.
As of the last meeting, Mr. Chairman, with regard to the incentives, to the exemptions and the privileges granted under the SPB law, then you must have the certificate of eligibility.
Kung wala.
If you do
Kung
not
wala
have,
at ginamit mo yung SPV Act, kung wala at ginamit mo yung SPV Act, legal ba yun o hindi?
Again, Mr. Chairman, I will not say it's legal or illegal.
Sorry, yes.
What I can say is that in that case, there is non-compliance with the requirements of the SPB law. But then with regard to the privileges and to the tax exemptions, then you cannot make use of those privileges if you do not have the COE, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Pero tama po ba, Attorney Lagadjo, for the record na lang, absolute ang provision ng SPV Act. Yung law mismo wag yung implementing rules and regulations. Absolute that any account or loan, and if I may read to you the SPV law, para lang ho klaro for the record. Section 12, Article 3, transfer of assets to SPV. Letter B, the transfer of NPAs from a financial institution to an SPV shall be subject to prior certification of eligibility as NPA by the appropriate regulatory authority. Ibig sabihin, sinabi ninyo na non-performing asset siya, non-performing loan siya.
This provision, Mr. Chair, says that the transfer of NPAs from financial institution to an SPB shall be subject to prior certification of eligibility as NPA. So the use of the word shall is mandatory in that sense that if you are going to make use, again, as I've said, of those privileges and tax exemption, there has to be the
Huwag ka
certificate
muna
of eligibility.
do not add to the provision. Ang sinasabi niya, di ba, subject to prior certification of eligibility.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Tama. Ngayon, ba't tayo nagkakagulo, Mr. Chairman? Kasi later on, gumawa sila ng implementing rules and regulations. Ang sinabi nila dito sa Section 12, yung binabanggit nila na, eto yung muna Section 12, Notice and Manner of Transfer of Assets. Ang sabi niya dito, that all an FI that intends to transfer its NPA to NSB shall file an application for eligibility of said NPAs. Sinabi niya rin dito sa Implementing Rules and Regulations, pero kinwalify niya sa kanyang definition dito. Sabi niya, a certificate of eligibility refers to the certificate issued by the appropriate regulatory authority as to the eligibility of the NPL or OPOA for purposes of availing of tax exemptions. Sa definition of terms tayo nagkagulo. Pero yung batas, malinaw. Absolute. Kailangan nagkaroon kayo ng eligibility. Ito nakakatakot, Mr. Chairman, kasi nagkaroon na naman tayo ng fees. Yan ang una nating bantayan. Ang pangalawa nating bantayan, which did not happen here, in fairness, marami sa mga may utang, bumubo ng sarili ng SPAV. Tapos ibibenta doon, bibili nila ng mas mura. In fairness, wala naman ako nakita dito na nangyaring ganyan. But is this not correct? Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, marami kayong nakikitang mga ganitong at least movement in the industry. Yung utang niya 1 billion, binili ng SPAV ng 500 million, siya rin pala yung nasa likod ng SPAV. So nagkaroon siya ng diskwento sa kanyang utang. So Mr. Chairman, again, I apologize for that. Pero wag muna tayong magsabi dito ng illegal dahil kung ako tatanungin, illegal yung nangyari. And simple lang naman yung aking sinabi. Magtanong kayo sa Pag-ibig. Magtanong kayo sa National Mortgage Finance Corporation, GSIS, SSS. Hindi sila makabenta na mas mura not unless meron silang SPV. Dahil may book value, magkakaroon tayo ng graft and corruption. Parang yan, Mr. Chairman, sa lupa ng gobyerno. Di ba magbibenta ka ng lupa ng gobyerno, 1,000? Ang sinabi nung ginawang market study, hindi mo pwede ibenta ng 900. At kung meron ka pang sa record pa nga natin sa gobyerno, whichever is higher, the book value of the land, kung 1 bilyon na yung lupa, or the fair market value, whichever is higher. Grabe yung ating ginogovern dito, kaya hindi pwedeng lumusot to. For the private banks, however, pwede. Diba, wala naman tayong pakialam sa kanila eh. A bank now will sell it, yun yung sinasabi yung transfer of credit, assignment of credit. O yung utang mo sa akin, ibibigay ko sa kabila. Pwede yun, pero tayo hindi. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.